The United States of America was the first country to develop a nuclear weapon. The story begins in 1938 when German scientists discovered the phenomenon of nuclear fission, the process of splitting atoms to release an enormous amount of energy. In 1939, Albert Einstein sent a warning letter to the US government, alerting them to the potential danger of this technology being weaponized, especially if Nazi Germany succeeded in developing it first. The US responded swiftly and launched the top-secret Manhattan Project in 1942, which continued until 1945. The project brought together scientists from the US, the UK, and Canada, including notable figures like Robert Oppenheimer, and Enrico Fermi. The project was massive, consuming about 1% of the US GDP, a staggering amount that highlights how critical it was. The main motivation was the fear that Nazi Germany was also working on a nuclear bomb. In July 1945, the US conducted the world's first nuclear test, codenamed Trinity, in the New Mexico desert. Just a month later, the US dropped 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, nicknamed Little Boy and Fat Man, forcing Japan to surrender and effectively ending World War II. These bombings also sent a powerful message to the Soviet Union, marking the beginning of the nuclear age. In the years that followed, the US adopted a policy of deterrence rather than direct use, leading to the creation of international agreements and organizations like the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, aimed at preventing the spread of nuclear weapons. When Soviet leader Joseph Stalin met with US President Harry Truman and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill at the Potsdam Conference to discuss Germany's fate after its defeat, Truman received a secret message confirming the success of the first atomic bomb test, the Trinity test in New Mexico. Truman informed Stalin in vague terms that the United States possessed a weapon of immense power. Stalin showed no visible reaction, but internally he was deeply angered. Despite already knowing, thanks to his spies embedded in the Manhattan Project, that the US was developing a nuclear bomb, Stalin was infuriated by America's success and its lead in acquiring such a weapon. In truth, Stalin had launched his own secret nuclear program as early as 1941. Soviet scientists had noticed a sudden halt in Western publications on nuclear fission, raising suspicions that Germany, the UK, and the US were secretly developing advanced weapons. After the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Soviet Union accelerated its efforts dramatically, relying on 3 key pillars: intensive espionage on the American Manhattan Project through agents like Klaus Fuchs, who leaked critical information, utilizing captured German scientists after the war, conducting independent research, as Stalin feared the leaked data might be deliberate American misinformation. Years later, in 1949, the Soviet Union detonated its first nuclear bomb, RDS-1, in a secret test in Kazakhstan. The explosion shocked the United States and the world, marking the official end of America's monopoly on nuclear weapons. With this, the Soviet Union became the second country in history to possess this deadly technology. The United Kingdom became the third country in the world to possess nuclear weapons. Its nuclear program began early in 1940 under a project called Tube Alloys, the first government-backed nuclear effort. The program relied heavily on European scientists who had fled Nazi persecution. Later, Britain merged its research with the American Manhattan Project under the Quebec Agreement, which aimed to share nuclear knowledge between the two allies. However, after World War II, the United States ended the nuclear partnership and refused to share any results or technology with the British. This decision caused major disappointment in London. In response, the UK resumed its nuclear program independently, building on earlier research and using uranium sourced from its colonies. In 1952, Britain successfully conducted its first nuclear test, Operation Hurricane, on the Montebello Islands off the coast of Australia, officially becoming the world's third nuclear power after the United States and the Soviet Union. Thermonuclear weapons, also known as hydrogen bombs, represent the second generation of nuclear arms, and their destructive power far exceeds that of conventional atomic bombs. While atomic bombs rely on nuclear fission, hydrogen bombs harness the power of nuclear fusion, the same process that fuels the heart of the sun and stars, releasing an immense amount of energy. The United States was the first to develop this weapon, driven by fears of a possible Soviet advantage. Despite warnings from scientists like Robert Oppenheimer, President Harry Truman approved the development of the hydrogen bomb. In 1952, the US detonated the world's first thermonuclear bomb, Pique, on Eniwetok Atoll in the Pacific. The explosion was approximately 450 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Nagasaki. The Soviet Union responded quickly. After observing the Pique test, they accelerated their nuclear program and successfully conducted their first thermonuclear test in 1955, codenamed RDS-37. Then came Tsar Bomba in 1961, the most powerful nuclear explosion in history. With a yield of 50 megatons, it was equivalent to more than 3,000 Hiroshima bombs. Following its success with conventional nuclear weapons, the United Kingdom entered the thermonuclear race. Between 1956 and 1958, it conducted a series of tests in the Pacific under Operation Grapple. In 1957, the UK successfully detonated its first full-scale hydrogen bomb. France became the fourth country to enter the global nuclear arms race. After the Suez Crisis in 1956, an event that exposed France's heavy reliance on the US and Britain, the nation was determined to assert its independence and reclaim its status as a global power. Despite some of its scientists having previously contributed to the Manhattan Project, France chose to develop its own nuclear program entirely independently and under high secrecy. The effort received partial technical support from Israel and relied heavily on uranium resources extracted from its former colonies, including Niger, Gabon and Madagascar. The initiative was driven by President Charles de Gaulle, who saw nuclear weapons as the key to national sovereignty and strategic independence from NATO. In 1960, France conducted its first successful nuclear test in the Algerian desert, then a French colony, codenamed Gerbois Bleu, or Blue Jerboa, but France didn't stop there. Determined to join the ranks of thermonuclear powers, France continued to advance its capabilities. In 1968, it detonated its first hydrogen bomb, codenamed Canopus, firmly establishing itself as an independent nuclear power among the world's elite nations.
China holds the position as the fifth nation to develop nuclear weapons. Its program was born out of a desire to counterbalance American and Soviet dominance on the global stage. The initiative began in the 1950s, initially supported by the Soviet Union under a cooperation agreement between the two communist powers. The Soviets provided China with reactors, equipment, and scientific training, but the alliance quickly soured. Mao Zedong accused Nikita Khrushchev of cowardice in the face of the West, calling his actions a betrayal of communist ideals. As a result, the Soviet Union withdrew its experts and halted all assistance in 1959. China was left to continue its nuclear program independently. Despite immense challenges, including a devastating famine during the Great Leap Forward and the turmoil of the Cultural Revolution, Chinese scientists pressed on in total secrecy. They relied on the country's vast reserves of uranium and internal resilience. In 1964, China successfully detonated its first atomic bomb in the Lop Nor Desert under the codename Project 596. Just 3 years later, in 1967, China shocked the world by detonating its first hydrogen bomb, marking the fastest leap in history from fission to fusion technology. With this, China firmly established itself as a full-fledged nuclear power, capable of retaliating against both the United States and the Soviet Union. Israel is believed to be the sixth country to develop nuclear weapons, but to this day it has never officially confirmed or denied possessing them. This deliberate ambiguity is known as the policy of nuclear opacity. Because of this secrecy, the exact number of warheads and the timeline of their development remain unclear. Israel's nuclear program began in the 1950s with key assistance from France. This cooperation led to the construction of the Dimona nuclear facility deep in the Negev desert. In 1963, US President John F. Kennedy expressed serious concerns about Israel's nuclear ambitions. He pushed for international inspections of the Dimona site, but Israel rejected full transparency and instead arranged staged tours, while secretly building underground facilities away from view. At the heart of this push was Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, who was obsessed with acquiring a nuclear deterrent, causing growing tension with the United States. That tension eased after Kennedy's assassination, as his successor, Lyndon B. Johnson, took a more flexible stance.
Under his administration, Israel was quietly allowed to continue its program, which is believed to have been completed by 1967. Then, in 1986, the world was rocked by a shocking revelation. Israeli nuclear technician Mordecai Vanunu leaked dozens of photographs and documents to a British newspaper, confirming that Israel had secretly developed nuclear weapons, possibly even hydrogen bombs, at the Dimona facility. In response, Vanunu was kidnapped in Rome by the Israeli Mossad, lured by an undercover agent posing as a romantic interest. He was secretly flown back to Israel, charged with treason and espionage, and sentenced to 18 years in prison. India ranked 7th and began its nuclear program in the 1940s for peaceful purposes in cooperation with Canada and the United States, which provided a nuclear reactor for energy production under the condition it not be used militarily. However, India secretly used it to develop a nuclear weapon. The main reason behind India's move toward nuclear arms was deterrence, first against China after losing territory in the Himalayas in 1962, and then against Pakistan, due to repeated tensions between the two countries. In 1974, India detonated its first nuclear bomb in the Rajasthan desert under the name Smiling Buddha, describing it as a peaceful test. This sparked international criticism and sanctions, especially since India refused to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT. Despite the test, India did not declare possession of a nuclear arsenal until the 1990s, when it conducted a series of nuclear explosions in 1998 under Operation Shakti, officially confirming its nuclear capability. India declared a policy of defensive deterrence and pledged no first use of nuclear weapons. South Africa has one of the strangest stories in nuclear weapons history. It began its nuclear energy program in 1948, benefiting from its possession of the world's largest uranium reserves, which made it a key supplier to the United States, Britain, France, and possibly the Soviet Union and Israel. Although exports were officially for peaceful purposes, it's believed that some of the uranium was used for weapons development. During the 1960s and 1970s, with growing Soviet influence in Namibia and Angola, and facing international isolation due to its apartheid regime, South Africa found itself without allies and secretly decided to develop nuclear weapons. In 1977, it built a nuclear test site in the Kalahari Desert and nearly carried out a test, but a Soviet satellite detected the preparations, leading to the test's cancellation under international pressure. 3 years later, in 1979, a double nuclear flash was detected by American satellites near the Prince Edward Islands, in what became known as the Vela incident. It is widely believed this was a joint test by South Africa and Israel, with Israel providing technical assistance in exchange for uranium. By the mid-1980s, South Africa had built 6 nuclear bombs, each roughly the size of the Hiroshima bomb. With the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of apartheid approaching, the government feared the weapons might fall into the hands of a new regime. So, South Africa made the unprecedented decision to voluntarily dismantle its nuclear arsenal, becoming the first country in history to both build and fully dismantle its nuclear weapons by choice. It publicly declared this action, allowed the International Atomic Energy Agency (IAEA) to verify it, destroyed all bomb designs, and secured the remaining uranium. After India acquired nuclear weapons, Pakistan was not unaware, especially following its devastating defeat in the 1971 war, which led to the separation of East Pakistan and the creation of Bangladesh. At the time, Pakistan's Prime Minister declared, "If India builds the bomb, we will eat grass and leaves, but we will build one too." Following India's 1974 nuclear test, known as Smiling Buddha, Pakistan accelerated its efforts. A key figure was Dr. Abdul Qadir Khan, who had worked at a Dutch nuclear facility. He stole classified information on uranium enrichment and centrifuge designs and brought them to Pakistan, laying the foundation for its nuclear program. China also provided direct technical and material support to Pakistan, as both countries shared India as a common rival during the 1980s. Despite Pakistan's clear nuclear ambitions, the United States downplayed its capabilities, partly because Pakistan was a major ally in the war against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. In 1998, just weeks after India's Operation Shakti, Pakistan conducted 5 underground nuclear tests in the Chagai Hills, officially declaring itself a nuclear-armed state. Pakistan adopts a first-use policy, meaning it may use nuclear weapons preemptively, even without being attacked, unlike India, which maintains a no-first-use policy. This strategy has succeeded in limiting India's military responses due to fears of nuclear escalation. In 2004, Abdul Qadir Khan admitted to illegally transferring nuclear technology to North Korea, Iran, and Libya, raising global concerns, especially since these countries are not signatories to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT. North Korea is the most recent country to acquire nuclear weapons, driven by the vision of its founding leader Kim Il-sung to ensure regime survival and establish dominance, especially against South Korea and the United States. In the 1950s, the Soviet Union helped North Korea build nuclear energy facilities and train its scientists. However, when North Korea later requested assistance in developing nuclear weapons, the request was denied. As a result, in the 1970s, North Korea launched its own independent program, relying on its large uranium reserves. By the 1980s, US intelligence observed that North Korea was using reactor fuel to produce plutonium for military purposes. Although North Korea later joined the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, it delayed inspections by the IAEA and concealed its nuclear sites. In 1994, the United States offered to provide light water reactors, which are harder to use for weapon production, in exchange for halting its graphite-based reactors. North Korea initially agreed, but the deal collapsed in 2002 after accusations of secret uranium enrichment. North Korea withdrew from the NPT and resumed its nuclear program. While early support came from the Soviet Union and later China, the most critical assistance came from Pakistan through Abdul Qadir Khan. In 2005, Kim Jong-il declared that North Korea possessed nuclear weapons. A year later, it conducted its first nuclear test, which was weak and believed to be only partially successful. After Kim's health began to deteriorate, a second, stronger test was carried out in 2009, followed by a third in 2013. By 2016, North Korea announced the successful detonation of a hydrogen bomb, confirming its transformation into a full-fledged nuclear power. While some countries have successfully acquired nuclear weapons, others tried but failed, either due to international pressure, internal crises, or military interventions. Among the most notable are Iran, Syria, Libya, Egypt, Algeria, Sweden, Romania, Argentina, Brazil, Taiwan, Japan, and reportedly Iraq, though I personally doubt that claim. It is said that Iraq, Syria, and Iran reached advanced stages in their nuclear programs, but their facilities were bombed or sabotaged, especially by Israel. As for Japan, Brazil, and Argentina, they possess the technical capabilities to build nuclear weapons, but they chose to step back for political and peaceful reasons. I can explain these cases in more detail in a separate video. Many countries store their nuclear warheads on long-range nuclear submarines that dive deep and remain hidden for extended periods. Their main purpose is to ensure a second strike capability in the event of a nuclear attack on the country, making a surprise nuclear strike nearly impossible and strengthening deterrence and strategic stability.